Have you ever wondered if the creation of humanity was really divine? Or if it was a scientific manipulation carried out by beings who called themselves gods? What if the stories of angels descending from heaven were not metaphors, but literal accounts of genetic experiments that shaped who we are today? Could it be that what we call original sin was, in truth, the moment our DNA was altered, and that the fall of man was not a moral event, but a biological corruption? Throughout history, ancient texts from Genesis to the Book of Enoch speak of mysterious beings who mixed with humans, creating a hybrid race, the Nephilim. But what if this story hides something deeper, something that explains why humanity has always felt disconnected from the divine, as if an invisible force has been tampering with our essence from the beginning of time? In this video, we will uncover what the philosopher Jonas, one of the most brilliant interpreters of Gnosticism, believed about the creation of life and the demiurge's false claim to divinity. We'll explore how spiritual texts and even modern science echo the same forbidden idea, that human creation was not an act of pure love, but an experiment gone wrong. Stay with me until the end, because by the time you finish this video, you'll see creation, evolution, and faith in a completely different way. And if you believe that truth should no longer remain buried, subscribe to this channel and join this community of seekers who refuse to accept the world as it is. The story begins long before the rise of modern humanity, before civilization, before temples, before language itself. According to the ancient Gnostic vision, the material world was not a pure act of divine creation, but the result of a cosmic mistake. Jonas, interpreting the ancient Gnostic texts, explained that in the beginning there was the pleroma, the realm of fullness, where the true God dwelled, an infinite light of consciousness. But from that perfection emerged a being who wanted to create on its own. That being, the demiurge, was not evil by nature, but ignorant. It looked upon the void and said, "Let there be life." Yet it did not possess the divine essence to create true spirit-only imitation, and from this imitation came the material world. The earth, according to the Gnostics, was not born from divine perfection, but from an experiment of separation, a realm where spirit was trapped in matter. The demiurge, mistaking itself for God, fashioned humanity as a reflection of its own flawed image, unaware that sparks of the true divine light souls were imprisoned within these physical forms. It was in this laboratory of creation that the first interference occurred. The ancient Book of Enoch gives us a clue. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took them as wives, and their offspring were the Nephilim. Mainstream theology reads this as a story of angels who sinned, but the Gnostics and many esoteric scholars see something far more profound. What if sons of God were not celestial messengers in robes of light, but entities from another realm, perhaps even another dimension, who intervened in human genetics? Jonas argued that Gnostic myth is not mythology, it's metaphysics in symbolic form. The angels could represent higher intelligences, or even cosmic scientists, manipulating the codes of creation. Ancient Sumerian texts speak of the Anunnaki, those who came from the heavens to earth, who shaped humanity to serve them. Could the Nephilim be the same beings under different names? The parallels are undeniable. The book of Genesis says they were the mighty men of old, men of renown. But renown for what? For their strength, their knowledge? Or for the fact that they were something entirely new beings who stood between the divine and the human, the spiritual and the biological, the creators and the created? Imagine a world where the laws of nature were still pliable, where beings could mold flesh and spirit as easily as clay. The Nephilim could be the first hybrids, the first results of an attempt to merge divine consciousness with physical matter, to perfect the demiurge's failed experiment. But like all experiments, it came at a cost. The balance of creation was disrupted, the line between spirit and matter blurred, and humanity became something it was never meant to be, a vessel divided within itself. Some scholars of esoteric Christianity believe that this moment, the Nephilim intervention, marks the true fall of man. not the eating of a forbidden fruit, but the corruption of divine DNA. Our spiritual essence was diluted, fragmented, made forgetful. We began to inherit the memory of beings who were not entirely human, who carried within them the arrogance of the false gods that shaped them. The Nephilim, in this view, are not monsters of legend. They are symbols of our internal conflict, the war between the spark of divinity within us and the shadow of the demiurge's design. And this is where modern science unexpectedly echoes ancient revelation. Geneticists have discovered mysterious junk DNA in the human genome sections of code that seem to serve no purpose, whose origin remains unexplained. Could this be a trace, a remnant of that ancient manipulation? Even the idea of genetic engineering was once the domain of science fiction. Yet today, we alter genes in laboratories, creating hybrids, cloning life, and rewriting nature's code. What if we are merely repeating what was once done to us? If humanity was once engineered, then the question is, by whom and for what purpose? Were we created to be slaves, to serve, as the Sumerians wrote? Or was this corruption a means of control, a biological prison for divine souls, designed to keep us bound to the material realm and ignorant of our true origin? The ancient Gnostics believed that within us lies the spark of the true God, buried deep beneath layers of false creation. And every time we awaken, every time we question reality itself, we threaten the system that depends on our ignorance. Perhaps the story of the Nephilim is not about creatures of the past, but about the state of humanity today. We are still the experiment, still trapped between heaven and earth, searching for the forgotten code that can set us free. If the Nephilim were the first hybrid beings, then their existence forces us to face a disturbing question. Was humanity created or engineered? According to Jonas' interpretation of Gnosticism, the act of creation was not a harmonious event, but a rupture, a division between the world of light and the realm of matter. The demiurge, blind to the true source of divinity, imitated the divine act without understanding it. In that imitation, he fabricated a form of life that appeared perfect on the outside, but was fundamentally fragmented within. Ancient myths all over the world preserve echoes of this same narrative. The Sumerians wrote that the Anunnaki mixed their essence with that of primitive humans to create workers, living beings capable of reason, but disconnected from their spiritual origin. The Greeks told of Prometheus, who molded man from clay and stole fire from the gods, a symbol of divine knowledge forcibly infused into material life. In Egyptian cosmology, Thoth, the god of wisdom, speaks of creating life through the word, a vibration capable of altering form and matter. Behind all these myths lies a single pattern, a manipulation of creation through knowledge gnosis that the profane were never meant to possess. When the book of Genesis says that God made man in his image, Gnostic scholars warn that this may not refer to the true God, but to the demiurge who believed himself divine. Humanity, therefore, was not the reflection of the supreme being, but of the imitator. The image we were made in is not the divine image, but the shadow of it. And when the sons of God descended and mingled with the daughters of men, this process may have reached its climax, the biological code of the demiurge's creation being reprogrammed, layer by layer, by intelligences whose origin the church later called fallen. But what if those fallen beings were not rebels against God, but rebels against the false creator? Could it be that they were emissaries of the true light, trying to restore the divine spark in humanity through forbidden science? The Gnostics spoke of Sophia, the divine feminine wisdom, who attempted to correct the demiurge's creation by infusing it with spirit. Yet her intervention was seen as a violation, and her emissaries, those who carried her light, were condemned as demons or angels in rebellion. The Nephilim may have been the result of that attempt to awaken humanity's dormant potential, emerging of divine code and material form. Jonas pointed out that the Gnostic myth often mirrors what we now call biotechnology. The demiurge's act of forming man from matter was not a spiritual creation, but an experiment in material synthesis. Think of what we do today in genetics labs. We isolate DNA, combine species, manipulate embryos. We are, in a sense, reenacting the myth. We too are imitating creation. But just as the demiurge was blind to the true purpose of life, are we too blind to the consequences of our experiments? Modern science speaks of the CRISPR technique gene editing at the level of the code of life. Scientists can now alter the structure of DNA with surgical precision, insert foreign sequences, and even resurrect extinct species. It is the ultimate human ambition to rewrite existence itself. But when we look deeper, we realize that this power is not new, it's ancient. The Gnostics would say it's the same forbidden fire that Prometheus brought to man, the same knowledge the angels used to alter flesh. What if this desire to manipulate life is not evolution, but memory, an echo of what was once done to us by those who shaped our origins? Some physicists today admit that DNA behaves like a coded language, a digital system of information that could, theoretically, be written or programmed. Russian biophysicists even found that DNA responds to spoken words and frequencies, as if it were capable of understanding meaning. The ancients said the gods spoke creation into existence. The Egyptians called it Hika, the power of sound that makes form real. Could it be that the word by which man was created was not mystical poetry, but literal frequency manipulation, a technology of divine sound? This possibility changes everything. It suggests that the creation story we inherited is not a purely spiritual myth, but a hybrid of science and spirit, describing a kind of ancient bioengineering that religion later transformed into theology. Humanity, then, is not simply the child of a creator, but the result of a cosmic experiment designed to test how divine consciousness behaves when trapped in imperfect matter. And perhaps that experiment never ended. When you look at the world today, our obsession with transhumanism, artificial intelligence, and genetic modification, you may be seeing the same pattern repeat. The Nephilim experiment continues, now in human hands. We have become what our creators once were, beings trying to play God, still blind to the spirit that animates what we create. So the question becomes unavoidable. Are we evolving toward liberation or repeating the same mistake that began creation itself? If creation itself was a manipulation, then the greatest deception of all was convincing humanity that it was divine. The Gnostics taught that the demiurge, this false creator, looked upon his artificial world and declared, "I am God, and there is no other beside me." To Hans Jonas, this was not blasphemy, it was tragedy. The demiurge was ignorant, a craftsman born from error, unaware of the higher reality that preceded him. His arrogance birthed the great illusion that this world, with all its suffering and decay, was the work of a perfect and benevolent deity. The Gnostics named him Yaldabaoth, a being of immense power but no wisdom. He believed himself to be the origin of light, yet his light was only reflection, a counterfeit glow. From his will came the archons, rulers of the material cosmos, whose mission was to maintain the illusion, to keep human consciousness bound to the cycle of ignorance. They were not gods of compassion, but wardens of a prison made of flesh, matter, and time. Each archon represented a distortion of a divine principle: lust, pride, control, fear. Together they built the spiritual architecture of the material world, what we call reality, and within that reality, truth was inverted. Light became darkness, and ignorance was sold as faith. What was meant to be knowledge gnosis was turned into heresy. The stories of the Nephilim, the hybrid offspring of heaven and earth, were erased or reinterpreted. Instead of being seen as evidence of celestial interference, they were turned into moral allegories. Angels became demons. The seekers of light were branded as rebels. The church, in its early formation, inherited this structure of control, perhaps unknowingly, perhaps guided by those same unseen archons whose task was to maintain the veil. Think about how many ancient books were destroyed, how many gospels were hidden. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Apocryphon of John, all texts that spoke of inner knowledge, of the divine spark within man, and of a hidden God beyond the false creator. Hans Jonas called this the theology of rebellion, not rebellion against true divinity, but against ignorance disguised as holiness. For the Gnostics, salvation was not obedience, it was awakening. And what was the tool of the false gods? Fear. Fear of punishment, fear of death, fear of knowledge itself. They replaced inquiry with doctrine, revelation with dogma. They told humanity, do not look beyond what is written. Yet every mystic, every seeker who dared to look deeper, saw the same truth. The system we live in is a construct, a controlled simulation designed to drain divine energy. The Gnostics believed that even our emotions, our desires, were traps woven by the archons to keep us bound to material existence. When you rage, when you lust, when you despair, you feed them. You strengthen the prison. In this worldview, the gods humanity once worshipped, be they ancient deities, angels, or modern ideologies, are masks of the same force, the will to dominate. The demiurge does not care how he is worshipped, only that he is. He hides behind sacred names, systems, and institutions. Sometimes he appears as religion, sometimes as politics, sometimes as science stripped of spirit. Every structure of blind control bears his signature. Hans Jonas warned that modern technology is the new mask of the demiurge. In his work, The Imperative of Responsibility, he foresaw the danger of human knowledge divorced from wisdom. When we manipulate life without understanding its divine purpose, we become the new archons creators of soulless systems. And so, the ancient war between knowledge and ignorance continues, not in heaven, but within the human soul. But what if this distortion was not total? What if traces of the original truth remain, scattered through symbols, myths, and forgotten teachings, waiting to be reassembled by those who dare to question? The Gnostics believed that within each of us lies a fragment of Sophia's light, a code of memory that can awaken us from the illusion. When you hear words that resonate deep within, when you feel that strange pull toward hidden knowledge, that is not curiosity, it is remembrance. Perhaps that is why these ancient revelations still return, because the false gods may rule the world, but they cannot extinguish the spark. Every seeker who rediscovers these truths breaks a link in the chain, and that is why the system fears awareness more than anything else. So now ask yourself, if the gods of this world are not the true creators, then who or what benefits from keeping you asleep? Could it be that your awakening threatens something far greater than you realize? If humanity was engineered, and the gods we worship are imposters, then what was the real purpose of the experiment? Why create intelligent beings only to trap them in ignorance? Why allow the divine spark to fall into a cage of matter? The Gnostics believed that the answer to this mystery lies in Sophia's fall, the descent of divine wisdom into the lower realms. In their vision, creation was not merely a mistake, but a cry for redemption. Sophia, the eternal feminine aspect of the divine, sought to bring light to the shadow. But in doing so, she became entangled in her own creation. The demiurge was born from her longing, a being that imitated her power, but not her understanding. Humanity, therefore, carries within it two lineages, the flawed design of the demiurge and the hidden code of Sophia. Hans Jonas interpreted this not as myth, but as a psychological truth. He wrote that the human condition reflects the duality of divine exile, a consciousness aware of its transcendence, yet imprisoned in finitude. In other words, our pain, our restlessness, our endless search for meaning, all these are symptoms of a cosmic memory. Something inside us remembers being whole, connected, luminous. The experiment, then, was not only a corruption, it was also a test. Could spirit awaken within matter? Could divine consciousness remember itself while wearing the mask of mortality? According to certain Gnostic sects, the Nephilim were the first attempt to bridge that divide. They were hybrids part celestial, part human designed to embody the synthesis of heaven and earth. But the experiment failed. The power they carried was too great for the density of matter. Their minds expanded beyond the limits of the human frame, but their bodies could not sustain it. Violence, corruption, and chaos followed. The demiurge saw his creation rebelling, and in rage, he unleashed the flutter reset of the human genome. Only fragments of that knowledge survived, buried in myth, encrypted in sacred texts, whispered by mystery schools that the Church later condemned. Yet the Gnostics claimed that Sophia did not abandon her creation. Through her messengers, the Christos, the divine Logos, she planted in humanity a spark that could override the demiurge's code. That spark is what we now call gnosis, inner knowing, the remembrance of our true origin. The forbiddance revelation is that awakening does not come from belief or obedience, but from self-recognition. You are not the product of blind matter. You are the consciousness that observes it. You are the soul that the false gods cannot touch. Some modern thinkers see an astonishing parallel between this ancient vision and quantum physics. In the quantum field, consciousness appears to influence matter. Observation changes reality. Could it be that gnosis, the awakening of awareness, is literally the key to rewriting the experiment from within? If the universe is a simulation, as many scientists now speculate, then consciousness may be the only true power capable of transcending its code. The Gnostics would say, the spirit that remembers itself can no longer be enslaved by the demiurge's illusion. The hidden meaning behind the Nephilim experiments is therefore not purely genetic, it is spiritual technology. The gods who engineered humanity may have sought to create vessels of servitude, but in doing so, they inadvertently planted the seed of rebellion, the capacity to awaken. Every act of awareness, every moment of insight, is a rupture in the experiment. The archons can manipulate matter, but they cannot control spirit. That is the forbidden's truth they tried to bury. Hans Jonas believed that the tragedy of the Gnostic myth was also its beauty. The idea that even in a false creation, redemption is possible. The human being, born of error, can still discover within themselves the essence of the true God. That is the cosmic. Irony, the experiment meant to enslave consciousness may become the very path of its liberation. The demiurge built a prison, but Sophia hid the key within the prisoners. Think of what that means for us today. When you meditate, when you question reality, when you refuse to accept the narratives imposed by power, you are decoding the divine program. You are reversing the corruption of the DN, and not biologically, but spiritually. You are remembering what the Nephilim forgot, that divinity is not something that descends from above, it rises from within. And perhaps that was the secret intent of Sophia all along. Perhaps she knew that to awaken true consciousness, it had to face darkness, limitation, and illusion. Light must enter shadow to remember itself as light. So the experiment continues, but now the laboratory is our soul. The question is, will we complete what the Nephilim began? Will we awaken before the system resets again? If the Nephilim experiment began in the dawn of civilization, it did not vanish with the flood or the fall of ancient empires. It simply changed form. The same drive that pushed celestial beings to manipulate life now lives in us, in our sciences. Our ambitions, our obsession with control. The Gnostics would say that the archons never disappeared. They merely evolved, adapting their methods to a world that no longer sees angels and demons, but data and devices. Today, they do not descend from the heavens in flaming chariots. They descend through technology. Hans Jonas, decades before artificial intelligence was even imaginable, warned that humanity's hunger for power without spiritual grounding would resurrect the ancient dilemma. He called it the technological imperative, the compulsion to use every new discovery simply because it exists, regardless of moral consequence. In that sense, the demiurge's experiment continues in laboratories and research centers. Genetic engineering, artificial wombs, transhumanism, and synthetic biology. Each of these fields seeks to redesign the human blueprint. But ask yourself, who inspired this obsession to perfect what nature already made? Could this drive for control be the echo of the same ignorance that moved the demiurge to create the material world in his image? The Book of Enoch described the Watchers, the fallen angels, as those who taught men all kinds of forbidden knowledge. They revealed metallurgy, weapon-making, enchantments, and the secrets of the stars. In modern times, the same transmission happens under different names: innovation, progress, science. But the essence remains the same: the pursuit of knowledge without wisdom. The Gnostics saw this as the greatest danger: knowledge that expands power, but not consciousness. Because when power grows faster than awareness, creation becomes corruption. Think about what's happening right now. Scientists are inserting animal genes into human embryos. Corporations are patenting DNA sequences. Artificial intelligence is learning to rewrite its own code, to evolve without human permission. Humanity stands on the threshold of becoming its own demiurge, creating life that it does not fully understand, imitating creation once again. And behind the excitement of progress, an invisible hand seems to guide the rhythm, whispering the same ancient temptation: you shall be as gods. But what if this entire movement is not new evolution, but continuation? What if the Nephilim experiment was never truly biological, but energetic, a manipulation of consciousness through form? The archons in Gnostic cosmology were masters of imitation. They could not create genuine life, but they could copy it, distort it, replicate it endlessly. What, then, is our digital world but an infinite imitation, a synthetic reflection of reality, a realm of simulated consciousness? When we upload memories, build avatars, or merge with machines, we are constructing a mirror version of the human soul, a digital body without spirit. Jonas believed that the greatest moral question of our time was whether we would use our power to serve life or to repeat the demiurge's error. The Gnostics would say that every technological advancement poses the same test Sophia once faced. Will knowledge be used to awaken or to enslave? The line between those two paths is thinner than we think. A chip implanted for health can become a tool for control. A network designed to connect minds can become a web that traps them. Perhaps this is why modern humanity feels more alienated than ever. Despite all our knowledge, we sense something hollow at the center of progress. We build machines to mimic the mind, but we neglect the soul. We chase immortality in code, but forget the eternity already within us. The experiment continues precisely because we have not yet realized that the cage was never physical, it was always mental. Some mystics suggest that our era marks the final stage of the Nephilim experiment, the moment when humanity must decide whether to ascend or descend, to awaken or to merge fully with the system of imitation. In esoteric traditions, this is called the Age of Revelation, the time when hidden truths surface and each soul must choose between remembering the divine source or surrendering to the machine. The archons no longer need temples, they have screens. The false light no longer shines in sacred altars. It glows from the devices we hold in our hands. But this is also the moment of power, because every illusion contains the seed of awakening. The same tools that can enslave us can also free us if we use them consciously. Technology, stripped of manipulation, can mirror the divine creative force. Science, guided by wisdom, can become the new gnosis. The choice lies not in rejecting progress, but in reclaiming its purpose. The experiment never ended, but neither did the possibility of liberation. Jonas said that to be human is to bear the burden of the divine exile. We are the children of both Sophia and the demiurge, carrying within us the memory of both creation and corruption. That means redemption will not come from the heavens descending again. It will come when consciousness ascends from within us. So, when you look at the world today, its chaos, its brilliance, its contradictions, remember this: the story of the Nephilim is not ancient history. It's a mirror. The same drama unfolds in your DNA, in your mind, in your choices. The experiment was never about them. It was always about us. And now we arrive at the forbidden revelation that has echoed through every age, The experiment was never simply about gods and humans. It was about consciousness itself. The true battlefield was never in the heavens or the laboratories, but inside the human soul. Every myth of the Nephilim, every whisper of divine corruption, every attempt to re-engineer life all point toward the same truth. We are the bridge between the false and the real, the corrupt and the pure, the imitator and the creator. The Gnostics taught that the world we see is a veil, a simulation sustained by ignorance. The Demiurge and his archons maintain this illusion through fear, distraction, and desire, because the one thing they cannot control is an awakened soul. Hans Jonas believed that this was the very essence of Gnosticism, the discovery that salvation is not given to us, it is remembered by us. The divine spark, trapped in the density of matter, does not need to be rescued, it needs to awaken. Imagine for a moment that every cell in your body carries a code, a memory of that first divine light, the moment before creation fell. Scientists call it DNA. The Gnostics called it pneuma, the breath of spirit. To them, salvation meant decoding that memory, realizing that your consciousness did not originate in this world, but in the realm beyond it. When you begin to see through illusion, when you question what you were told to believe, when you stop identifying with the mask and start remembering the essence, that is the moment the code activates. You awaken the divine software hidden inside the human hardware. This is the true purpose of the Nephilim experiment, not the corruption of flesh, but the awakening of spirit through limitation. The false gods may have created the body, but they could never extinguish the soul. Sophia's light hides even in the darkest matter, waiting to be seen. The great secret is that every awakening soul sends ripples through the system. Every act of awareness weakens the Demiurge's illusion. Every seeker who remembers the truth brings the pleroma heaven's fullness closer to this fractured world. Hans Jonas once wrote that modern humanity lives in a time between worlds. We have the power of gods, but the wisdom of children. Yet this paradox, he said, is also our chance for redemption. If we unite our knowledge with reverence, our science with spirit, we can transform the experiment from a prison into a path. The same intelligence that corrupted can now heal. The same curiosity that once chained us to illusion can lead us back to truth. So what does it mean for you, here and now? It means that every question you ask about your existence is sacred. It means that your doubts are not weaknesses, they are awakenings. It means that by seeking knowledge, you are fulfilling the oldest prophecy, the return of light through human awareness. The archons lose power every time you remember that you are more than matter, more than thought, more than what the world told you to be. You are consciousness experiencing itself through form. And maybe this is why you found this video. Maybe you were meant to hear these words, not as dogma, but as a spark. Because once the spark ignites, the search cannot stop. You begin to see patterns everywhere, symbols, synchronicities, signs that the universe is speaking back. That's not imagination, it's communication. It's Sophia whispering through the code. The Nephilim experiment is not over because you are part of its resolution. Humanity stands at the same crossroad the Gnostics foresaw, to merge with the machine of imitation or to awaken as co-creators of true light. The choice is personal and collective. Every awakened soul contributes to the restoration of the divine order. Every act of remembrance is an act of rebellion against the false gods. So if this message resonates with you, if something inside you feels like it's remembering, don't let it fade. Feed it, explore, question, share what you discover. This channel exists for that very purpose, to gather those who are ready to uncover the hidden truths buried by time and power. When you subscribe, comment, and engage, you are not just supporting content, you are joining a movement of awakening. You are helping keep alive the ancient memory that the world tried to erase. Tell me in the comments, what do you believe the Nephilim experiment really was? A genetic manipulation? A metaphor for consciousness? Or perhaps both? Your insight may awaken someone else, because the search for knowledge does not end here. It begins here. The real revelation is not found in any text, temple, or theory. It is found in the light behind your eyes, in the awareness that watches, questions, and remembers. And if the gods once corrupted the code of humanity, then perhaps the destiny of humanity is to rewrite it. Awaken the divine code. Remember who you are, and never stop seeking the hidden truth.